Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 13. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm talking to Cory, an artist living in Long Beach, California, who's also a teacher. In this episode, we talk about art not just as therapy, but a form of meditation, grief and loss as an aggravator of triggers, and we discuss the still very relevant topic of working from home and its pros and cons. Make sure to check the show notes for links to Cory's art on Instagram, plus a link to an interesting documentary about highly sensitive people that Cory mentions during our chat. Now, in the spirit of the talk of dogs in this week's conversation, I want to give a shout out to Hip Dog Creations, one of the many Misophone-owned businesses on misolist.com. It started as a hobby for the founder, Jennifer, and has since turned into a successful operation that she hopes will eventually get her out of her office day job. She does custom pet art and portraits. Link in the show notes or at misolist.com, MISOLIST. Remember, if you're at a business owned by a misophone or employs misophones, please let me know. You can go to misolist.com and click the add button. This is how we can all support each other's livelihoods. All right, now here's my conversation with Cory. Welcome, Cory. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So,
and I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to you for doing this podcast because earlier I was thinking about how this helps people like you and me who have this to express ourselves, to kind of to bond with other people, to know it's you're not alone. But also, I think it can be a great tool to educate people that don't have it, because that's kind of the flip side of it. When you have relationships with people, you have your part of it that you have to deal with, but you live with a family, or you have a partner or friends, and they need to have at least some understanding. And so this podcast is great in that way too. So I just want to say thank you for doing it.
I appreciate that, Cory. Yeah, and that's what it's all about. I think a lot of people read the articles in CNN or New York Times, and sometimes they're helpful, but they kind of can be a little clickbaity sometimes. So I think it helps to let somebody talk for a while about their entire experience and hear how it kind of interacts with the rest of their life. So
yeah, because it can be so multifaceted.
Exactly. And how did you find out about the podcast, actually?
Let's see, how did I? So I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think I just did a search in, can I say the name of the streaming service?
Yeah.
In Spotify. I think I just did a search in podcasts in Spotify for misophonia, and it was interesting to see what comes up.
Yeah.
So that is how I found this podcast. I was like, oh, wow, there's a podcast about it, So through a search.
Cool. Well, we're connected on Instagram as well, and I know that listeners can read the show notes, but your account is going to be there, and it's got some amazing art, and that's obviously one of the things I think we'll touch on is the fact that you think a lot about therapies for misophonia, and art is one of your therapies. Do you want to maybe start there and talk about how you've used art to deal with misophonia?
Yeah. Let's see. Originally, art became therapy for me after my mom died, and I noticed that when I started doing a little painting or drawing, it just made me feel so much better. And then I, of course, I kept doing it, and then it kind of snowballed from there, I guess you could say. It wasn't until a little later that I realized that I could use art as therapy to help me with misophonia. And what I realize now is that when I'm painting or working on a collage or drawing or whatever it is, I escape into this. It's kind of like escaping into another world, really. It usually involves having headphones on my ears or earbuds, playing music. But I definitely fall into this other place and escape from the real world, I guess you could say. And I enjoy existing in the real world. I love people. I'm very social, but after a while, the noise can take a toll on you when you have misophonia. And so my triggers even though I live alone, I'm single, I don't have any kids. My I'm still triggered on a daily basis because some of the noises that I am triggered by are everyday noises out in neighborhoods, places we go every day, such as dog barking. So it's something I have to contend with on a daily basis. And because of that, I mean, there are certain sounds that can be controlled. If door slamming is one of yours, then you make sure your family understands, don't ever slam the door, please. And they understand why, and then you can control that. But if I go for a walk in the neighborhood, there are going to be some dogs barking, and I have to, I just have to face it and do whatever I have to do to deal with it. But with my art as a form of therapy in addressing misophonia in particular, it really is about escaping. And what I've noticed is that I used to want to meditate. I used to really want to, I do yoga. I've heard so much about meditation, and I read a few books here and there about it, and then I would kind of try to do it, and and I didn't really feel that I succeeded at it for whatever reason. Made the effort, but what I did notice is that when I'm making art, I'm actually meditating. I mean, I'm sitting for hours and quiet. I'm not concerned with what's going on around me. I'm not being triggered. I truly am in this other place, or whatever you want to call it. And so, first and foremost, my artwork gives me that escape.
Yeah, you're kind of in your own zone. You've shut everything. You're kind of in control. I think that's one of the that's a theme that comes up a lot with folks is after being out in the real world, quote unquote, when triggers can come out of nowhere and you're not in control, it's good to center yourself and create something.
Absolutely. And so if I'm triggered when I'm at work and out and about at the gym or whatever, and then get home, it's kind of like what you were just saying, like if I can then have control over my dominion, if you will, my home, that, put on my white noise machine so I don't hear the dogs next door. And would put on whatever music is going to block out any other noises that might bother me. And then I'm in control, and that it sort of balances it out on a daily basis. So if I had to go through a whole day of just being triggered, I really don't know. I don't know if I would ultimately become desensitized to it and I would end up being fine at the end of it, or if I would completely just break and lose it. I don't know. But what currently exists for the most part is that I'm triggered for a portion of the day, maybe 20. Well, all right, let me put it this way. I'm not being triggered 20% of the day, but I spend about 20 to 30% of my day being around other people and possible triggers. But then the other 70% or what have you, that's when I have that control. And so when I can exercise that control, it balances out the day. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. Yep. And when you are working on that art, and when you've put yourself in that zone, are there certain themes that you're creating, or is it just the act of creating whatever it is kind of part of it? I guess what I'm saying is, is your art inspired by misophonia, and the imagery, is that inspired by misophonia as well?
Interestingly, it isn't really. I think I've only done one literal piece that related to misophonia, and I think I called it Triggered, and that piece sold. What's interesting is someone identified with it, but not in a misophonia way. It was a different sort of mental illness, I guess you could say, and so I found that interesting. But that was really the only literal one I did. Otherwise, I tend to go in, kind of create these other worlds, delve into these other worlds, so that I don't even have to think about misophonia, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a way to, yeah, this is how your mind kind of relaxes itself. And
Absolutely.
So are you showing actually, we should talk about where you're located, I guess.
Sure.
I think you're in California.
Yeah, I'm in California. So I live in Long Beach, California, but at the moment I'm in Palm Springs, visiting a friend who has a place here. And part of the reason for that is that I suffered a loss of one of my closest friends 2.5 weeks ago. And so and I did want to talk about this at some point because I think this
Hmm.
could help other people to realize an aspect of it. So what I noticed is that after I lost my friend, I was and this probably will not come to as a surprise to you or anyone else who listens to this, but what I noticed is after I found out, um, I was being triggered very, very easily. And so, I did what I had to do to deal with that. And eventually an opportunity came up to come to Palm Springs, which is a completely different environment from where I live. It has just a completely different vibe. Just everything looks different, and it's a place I come to relax. And so I came here to get away for a change of scenery, and I thought that might kind of shift something or kind of shake me a little bit. And because since I found out about my friend, I haven't been able to make any art, so I've been creatively stuck too. So I've been in a little bit of a bad place, but at the same time, I knew I needed to experience the grief and go through it. So instead of spending this time working on art, I've been doing a lot of like TV watching, binging and what have you. But just as of yesterday, that has changed, and I've kind of, some people say like, oh, my muse has returned. So it's kind of like my muse has returned. And um, so I live in Long Beach, but I'm in Palm Springs for about a week, and that change of scenery has just done wonders for me. And also, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
sometimes I have a
please.
stream of consciousness, and
No,
if I
I
don't
love
say it
that.
now, I'll never remember. But someone asked me earlier, when because I told him I was going to be doing this podcast today, and he asked me an interesting question, and he's only the second person who's asked me this question after I told them I had misophonia. He asked me, "So, are there any particular sounds that you really like?" And I said, absolutely. There's totally a flip side to all this. I'm a huge fan of music. And that's just one example. But the thing about Palm Springs, coming back to living in California, um, in Palm Springs, I hear some of my favorite sounds. And there are a lot of birds around here, so there's a lot of chirping. That might get on some people's nerves, but I really like it. What I really love is when it gets breezy or even windy, and you hear the palm fronds rustling. They're just kind of rubbing against
Yeah.
each other, and it's like getting this auditory massage, and it feels so incredibly cleansing. And then you have these beautiful mountain views and these tremendous palm trees, and it's just so bright and sunny and bright pink bougainvillea. It's just a beautiful place. And so the long answer to your short question,
No, I love long answers.
like living in Long Beach, it's much more, it's not as urban as Chicago or New York City, but it's more urban, and it's more heavily populated. More traffic, more people, just more people, and so it's more congested. And Palm Springs, on the other hand, is, it's pretty, it's kind of empty right now, and very quiet and serene.
Yeah,
And
it's Palm Springs is a pretty tourist oriented, right? So it's going to be
yes,
pretty empty right now.
definitely. Yeah, yeah. It did pick up a little for Memorial Day, but overall, still the whole vibe is just very chill. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there once. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
beautiful. It's a whole other world.
Yeah.
I've been to the Salton Sea as well. There's literally another world over there.
Yeah, I did a short film about that because it that place is just striking.
Yeah.
It's like what is, and of course I had to read about the history and everything. But it's just basically a failed ecosystem that man created.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, let's take a look at this and learn from our mistakes. But it's, as an artist, going there and visiting, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I took a bunch of photography there. Amazing. People still live there. That's the amazing thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so going back to going back to your after the loss of your friend being triggered more. A lot of people get triggered more in times of stress, like work kind of stress. Was this a
hmm
similar kind of thing, you think? Just the stress of having lost someone close to you?
I guess so. And it makes sense. It hasn't come as a surprise to me. And I just, I would tell myself, well, Corey, you just got to ride this out. You go through the stages and whatnot and feel it. I don't want to suppress it and not think about it,
Yeah.
drink or something. I want to go ahead and face it head on. sort of get through it so that I can, start celebrating her life more. And, I'm actually creating a, a piece. I'm looking at it right now. Since I kind of got creatively unblocked yesterday, I started working on a collage, a large scale collage of her with, she was really into flowers. And so I've gone through her Instagram and looked at all the flowers that she posted, and I'm using those flowers and I'm putting them in the mural all around her. And so I've got my therapy back. So I'm doing so much better.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So, and then, so you were working. I guess there's a reason why you haven't completely moved to Palm Springs. You're working in Long Beach. I assume that's where you're working. Oh, what do you do for work?
So up until the quarantine, I primarily supported myself as a substitute teacher, and I did some tutoring, but and then some freelance proofreading for an educational publishing company.
Hmm.
And so, who knows when I'll be teaching again? So
Yeah.
what I've been working on is basically two things: how to show and sell my art online more often, and have a better approach to that. And then I really want to work from home. And so this is definitely linked to misophonia. What I Before I returned to substitute teaching. So okay, so this is interesting. As a substitute teacher, people would say, "Wow, you're a substitute teacher. You have misophonia. Doesn't it drive you crazy because kids are noisy?" And I'd say, "Yeah, kids are noisy, but here's the thing: when I'm the teacher, I'm in charge. I'm in control of the situation, so I can set the tone with my own volume of voice, with turning off one of the lights and making it a little bit dimmer, and playing a quiet game for a moment, or whatever it is, making it a little contest, and just kind of quiet the room." Just to sort of set a baseline, I guess. And then from there, just kind of relax into it. Then I know at least I'm not being triggered, and then I can function, 100%. It's fine, but I have control over it because they're kids. What I've and I'm 99% successful at that, I'd say. Now, when it comes to trying to get other adults to quiet down so that you can do your work, that's actually a lot more challenging. And with that comes diplomacy and nuances and how you approach it. And you don't want to embarrass
Bribery
anyone.
and no, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
bribery. And so that can be extremely challenging. And so the realization I've come to is that I just need to work from home. I want to edit manuscripts. Really what I'd love to do is just be sent manuscripts for books and just take one at a time and just spend a month or whatever it is and thoroughly edit the whole thing from my couch or sitting at the beach or wherever. And that's that's going to help me a lot with misophonia and how misophonia can impact my work performance because it can. So I'm taking the whole control of the situation and applying it to an even larger scale and deciding just work from home. And that doesn't mean, some people say, well, I guess they're not saying it as much anymore, but I want to work from home. You're home by yourself all day. I want to be around people. And I said, well, here's the thing: being kind of stuck in an office with coworkers that don't understand misophonia and they start resenting you because you're asking them to be quiet so you can do your work. That's a tough thing to go through, and it's stressful, of course. And then by the end of the day, you're kind of exhausted from dealing with all that, and so you don't have as much energy to go be social with your closer friends that you really do want to spend time with. So if I work from home, I'm home alone all day, getting my job done even faster than if I was around anybody. And then when someone says, "Hey, let's go to dinner," I can say, "Heck yeah, I've been alone all day. That sounds great." So the people I'm with it's going to be more quality time because I'll be with people that I want to be with. Does that make sense? I don't want to sound rude or anything.
It absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I work from home. I work from home. I've also worked in offices before, so I know the whole dynamics of happy hour and working, side by side with people, solving problems. But if you have misophonia, yeah, I mean, I would say now's the time to pursue and see if working from home suits you by looking for, like you said, jobs where you can edit things online, or, you said you were trying to get into more selling your art, maybe setting up kind of online e-commerce. That's something you can. not only do for yourself, but if you acquire those skills, you can offer that as a service for other people as well, and maybe make some more income.
Hey, thanks for the
So,
idea.
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I would, yeah, whatever you're acquiring for yourself. I always say, just, if you need something, chances are thousands of other people do too. So, um, think about that as you're thinking about, you know, things you can do working from home.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
so yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, working from home, and then yeah, what you said is important. I mean, you can socialize with other people after if you get that nice rhythm going where you're working and then you're socializing, later or a different time. It doesn't
Yes.
always have to be with your coworkers. I think a lot of
Right.
people do their social life is tied very closely to who they meet at work, and it's
Yes.
probably based on their home life or where they live. But if you're in a dynamic place like where you are, you can get your work done, and there's probably tons of friends around or new people to meet in Long Beach.
Oh,
So
absolutely. All the time. Yeah.
that's really
And that's the
cool.
thing. I love people and I'm very social. I have a lot of friends, but it kind of goes back to the dog thing. I also love dogs. If you happen to look at my Instagram, you'll see a
Yeah.
lot of portraits of dogs. People commission me to do paintings of their dogs, and now I'm going to do some cats. But I love dogs. I just hate barking.
Yeah.
It's one of the main triggers. But it's like I don't hate the dog, I just hate the barking. But it's just like with people, I don't hate you because you're being loud and I can't edit this right now. I hate that I can't edit this, but I still like you. And it's like it's hard to get people to understand that. And it's when you have this, it took me a long time. It took me a long time to understand it. I'm still understanding it.
So yeah,
So
going back, yeah, going back, when did you first realize you had misophonia?
I first noticed that I have of course I didn't know that it had a name and that it was a condition, but
Right.
I first got triggered when I was about 6 years old, and my little sister was about one, and we would be sitting at the table as a family eating dinner, and she would engage in open mouthed eating.
Mm-hmm.
Of course she did because she's one, you know. But I had never noticed that before, and I noticed it. That really bothers me. And I remember telling my mom, like, Mom, please tell her to close her mouth. And this word I used, and I still use this word for it, is smacking. Close her, tell her
Yeah.
to close her mouth. She's smacking. I can't take it. And so she would do her best, but it was just, even when it happened, I thought it was so bizarre. Like, what is this? And then I didn't really get triggered that much, like in school. I was pretty well socialized in school and did perform pretty well, and I wasn't really distracted, all through pretty much through high school. I didn't start noticing anything again until college, when I would go to the movie theater and people would have popcorn, and they kind of pop it in their mouth and then chomp on it and then close their mouth. And that doesn't work. So if you want to be quiet when you eat popcorn, put it in your mouth, close your mouth, and then chew.
Yeah. That should come
So
on the bag.
yes, that would be great. I might start going to the movies again. But I started noticing that around college, and and I'm a huge movie fan, and took some film classes in college and whatnot. But I had to quit going to the movies. I finally realized, and it got bad because if I was okay if I went alone because I could just move to a different part of the theater or just leave. But if I went with friends, I don't want to put this on them. I don't want my misophonia to be a burden to anybody. And I don't want to burden my friends who are just trying to relax and watch a movie. It's not fair. So I first just said, I'm not going to go to the movies with anyone anymore. And then eventually I just said, I'm just not going to go to the movies anymore.
Yep. Are there any do you remember any movies that were particularly bad for me? So, and I might cut this out if it starts to trigger people, like the names
Oh,
of movies.
I don't remember. Well, I do want to say this. One of the last time, this is how I knew I need to stop going to the movies. I went and saw uh, an X-Files, the last X-Files movie, and there was a guy chopping on popcorn, and then he had his straw.
Oh
I won't
God,
make the
yeah,
noise because I don't want to
yeah,
trigger anybody, but he was moving the straw and making that that
Yeah.
noise,
Yeah.
and shaking the ice. And it was incredibly distracting. And when then the movie finally ended, and I say finally because I couldn't get into it, and then so it ended. It's like, okay, I can get out of here. And I was like, God, that sucked. So I don't know. A few years later, I was like, let me give it another shot without anybody making noise around me. And I watched the movie again. I was like, hey, I actually really liked this movie. It was good. And I didn't even notice these other subplots that I was really interested in. I never caught all these nuances because of the noise, it was being triggered. So that kind of cemented it for me, but it wasn't the movie itself. However, there are times, and this happened recently, I had to turn the volume down, when someone will be eating something, and it was something very recently. Someone will be eating something and it's that opened mouth chewing and they're smacking, and usually they're trying to show that this character is obnoxious, or he, doesn't have any manners, he's just a big pig. They're trying to illustrate that point. That's usually what it is. So I just turn the volume down and look away for a moment,
Yeah. Have you ever seen a movie that has maybe reflected someone with misophonia at all? Like, have you ever seen that trait in a character in a movie? I've always wondered that. I'm always thinking that one day somebody's gonna, create the great American movie where misophonia is kind of the tragic hero. I'm wondering if you've ever seen misophonia portrayed anywhere in film.
Not in a feature film, not in anything scripted, but I've only seen it in documentary form.
Gotcha, like in Quiet Please.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
And there is another documentary that isn't particularly about misophonia, but it's about high sensitivity.
Mm.
And Alanis Morissette is one of the people who was interviewed in the documentary. It was really good.
Oh,
and
she has misophonia? I didn't realize that.
So she doesn't say that she has misophonia. She describes it's more of a sensitivity thing.
Yeah.
But sound, if I remember correctly, sound is part of it. So it's a little bit. You could maybe argue that misophonia is part of it. But I wish I could remember. I think it's called Sensitivity or something, but I saw it on, what's the name? Oh, I'm so sorry to edit this out because I can't remember the streaming service. Good. It'll come to me later and I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu.
It's
Showtime.
Hoopla.
Hoopla. Okay, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so it's called Hoopla because I get into all these kind of obscure. I have very particular interests, and so I end up finding these little more obscure streaming services. So there's one called Hoopla that I get through LA County's library system, kind of like Canopy. If you ever find Hoopla there, and just do a search on sensitivity, and it'll come up. I think it shows a woman walking on a beach. Let me tell you, I want to watch it again. It made me feel so much better about my own sensitivities. Because the thing is, because sometimes people will say like, "Oh, I forget you're so sensitive," and it's like, "Wow, thanks a lot." You take it as, or I take it as an insult initially, but it isn't necessarily an insult. It's like, sometimes people are saying, "You're so sensitive, and it helps you to be a kinder person," or "You're so sensitive, and it helps you with your artwork," or "You're so sensitive, you're a better teacher because of it." It's not necessarily a bad thing,
Right. I think where it feels like it's a bad thing is when you realize that it's more than just being a little sensitive. That they don't understand the fight or flight that we feel.
Right.
I think that's kind of what we're
exactly.
What can kind of like annoy some people. And then so I mean, kind of going back to kind of maybe. So it looks like you got out of school okay with miso. Did it start to get bad like around, I don't know, sometime in your early adult life?
Yeah, it did. In fact, I don't have any recollection of anything happening from first grade through 12th grade that was misophonia related, like ever getting triggered ever. And I was around.
So you're okay. So wait, just to clear up, just kind of like we talked about your sister. Your parents were not triggers.
Okay, so let me clarify that. Speaking just about school environment or school life.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I managed to get from first grade through 12th grade, and I don't ever remember getting triggered at school. But at home, yes, it was the smacking thing. And then I made a few friends, and when they would eat, they would smack, and I'd ask them to not smack, and that interaction is different with different people. Some people understand, some people get upset, but I didn't really notice it in school for some reason. However, when I was around 30, I decided I want to return to school and maybe get a master's or maybe study to become an actuary, because I heard it's a good job. And so I took a statistics class and another math and a math class. And I was sitting in the statistics class one day and listening to the teacher lecture, and this guy, probably about 20 years younger than me, is in his desk right behind me and kind of leaned up toward the front of his desk, and he's chewing gum, and he's not closing his mouth, and his mouth is literally about 5 inches from my ear. And I thought I was going to explode. And it was so over the top. It's like something from one of those movies where they're trying to show how obnoxious somebody is. And I didn't say anything. I just turned around and looked at him. I don't know what look I had on my face. I think like big-eyed.
Glare.
Like maybe a glare. I don't want to have a confrontation, but I just kind of like need to let him know, like, stop, And so I just looked at him and then turned around, and he did stop. Thank God.
Did he see you? Did he do it based on that?
Because we made eye contact. Because our faces were 5 inches away from each other. It's like, dude, that's my ear. You're smacking gum in. Come on, really? But, yeah. But aside from that, like going through school, I don't ever remember. So I think, a lot of people say it gets worse as you get older. So having heard that a number of times, I decided I'm going to try to get ahead of that. And so I'm going to try to do my best to understand this and figure out how to cope with it socially so that I'm not upsetting people. And what are some things I can do to deal with it when it happens and to help me overall in life to have less stress so that, I am going to be triggered here and there, but I wanted to jump ahead of it. And I think I have. And I think mainly it's through my art. But I do a few different things that have really helped me.
Yeah, let's hear those.
So of course, art, I have to say, is number one. Number two, and I know you've heard this before, number two is exercise.
Yeah.
It just, in general, it helps people to be less stressed. And I just noticed that sometimes if I hear the dog next door barking and I'm being triggered, I can leave. I can go for a run or go for a bike ride. And when I come back, I'm not even thinking about that dog. So I went from being that blankety blank dog next door is driving me blanking crazy, and then I leave, go get some exercise, whatever it is, come back, I've completely forgotten about the dog. And so that tells me a lot right there, and I'm letting my emotions get the best of me. And that's kind of the third thing that I've started learning in the last year or so. I can't take credit for this. I learned it from someone who has an account on Instagram called Goodbye Misophonia. I think you follow her, or she follows you.
It sounds familiar, yeah.
She has a blog, and her thing is Goodbye Misophonia. She has misophonia, but she, of course, doesn't want to have it. And she's noticed that for her, she breaks it down into, and I'm sure this is probably oversimplifying it, but I guess maybe that's the best thing to do since I can't go into all of it and don't have a deep understanding of it. But what I have gathered from it and what I've started applying to my life, and it's helped me, is to, when I get triggered, try to separate the reality or the realistic, the thought, the objective truth of what's happening, separate that from my emotions and how I feel about the trigger. And so I've started doing that. So when it happens, I'm like, okay, I tell myself, okay, you're being triggered. What do you notice? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? How does your body feel? Do you feel hot? What do you want to do? And so I explore it, kind of like going through grief. Like I want to feel this and understand it. It's sort of like facing your fears head on. Like I want to understand it. And then when it happens next time, I do it again. Separate those two things. And it's almost like breaking it in half. And I can't physically stop the dog from barking, but I do. This might be controversial, but this is the place I'm at right now as a person with misophonia. I can't stop the next door neighbor's dog from barking, but I have power over how I'm going to respond to it. I truly believe that now. It doesn't mean it comes easily, and it doesn't mean, oh, my misophonia is gone now. No, it's just that I truly believe that, and it really helps me. Does that make sense? What do you think about
Yeah,
it?
that's interesting. Yeah, because I've been noticing that if I'm being triggered and I can tell myself in the moment, or maybe even a little bit before, if I suspect something's going to happen, if I just tell my brain that whatever happens or whatever is happening, it's not going to hurt you. I
Right.
think my brain somehow feels like it's now got control of the situation. I thought it actually meant that I was just calming, like kind of giving a proverbial massage to my fight or flight. But maybe that's what it is. It's that control. And also, I try to think about you know it, this period is going to be over in about 20-30 minutes. So that also kind of like lets me know that, or maybe give myself permission to leave a situation within a reasonable amount of time, and that also
Yeah.
kind of control. I don't know. Do certain themes come up when you do this over and over again during triggers, like in terms of what you're feeling and what you're exploring?
You mean as of more recently, since I've been doing this?
Yeah, yeah.
And by the way, I've talked to her through Instagram, and she featured that painting that I did about the one called Triggered. And so we communicate here and there, and she calls it, and I think she got this from a writer, but she calls it taming the tiger. So when you have that feeling like, the dog's barking and I want to kill the dog, or I want to kill someone, or I want to run away, or I want to smash the wall. I don't actually want to do any of those things. I love dogs. And they're all over my Instagram. I don't want to hurt any dogs, but it's just that fight or flight. Um, so I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, yeah,
It's
I was
so
curious. So
multifaceted, and
yeah,
you can go
well,
off in so many different directions.
absolutely. So yeah, I was wondering it because you were saying you were splitting it into two and trying to really consciously
Yeah,
explore
yeah.
more. I was
So I
just wondering if certain themes had come up as you were doing it over and over, or I don't know, or if every situation was different.
um I do notice that there is a pattern with it in terms of what comes to mind is, I guess, left brain, right brain. Like I think about that. And so, but what I have noticed is that I've been able to do it with different triggers. So I have other triggers that when I've tried it with that too, and it helps. And I also have been doing, I read this somewhere, and it's what you just said, that about how I only have 20 minutes left of this period. That relates to this next thing I'm going to mention, which is I started telling myself, this is temporary, this is temporary, this is temporary, and it's kind of a mantra. And I've even started doing it. Not even I'm kind of only half thinking about it. At first, it was very conscious, and I'm being triggered, and I'm upset, but I tell myself, this is temporary, this is temporary. But now I notice, now that I've done it a few times, I get triggered and I just start saying it, and I'm able to calm myself pretty quickly.
Yeah, interesting. And then the people around you as you're being triggered, are they like let's say they're friends of yours. Like how do you I mean, do you tell your friends like I guess like how many of your friends know about your misophonia and what is your reaction from other people?
So I've decided, once I learned what misophonia is, there's a name for it. Other people have it. People from around the world have this. It's not just me. Once I realized that and started learning more about it, I made a decision to tell everyone who is important to me about it and explain it to them so that they understand it. So when I get triggered, they know not to take it personally and they know what to do. You really don't really need to do anything. I'm going to be fine. Just know that I might suddenly start acting weird. Like I might suddenly get up and go in another room for a while, or I
Yeah.
might seem suddenly agitated and you have no idea why. Maybe I'm being triggered. So I explain it to them and I tell them what the trigger sounds are, and different people take that differently. Some people, but what I notice is that everybody is important to you and everyone who does care about you, no matter what, eventually everyone comes around to your side. So some people
Right,
do
that's
need,
interesting. Yeah,
isn't
they
that
could be
interesting? Yeah,
important to you. They might not come around to it initially, but
right.
hopefully they do. Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to give people time, because some people that I've told, I'll I'll tell them. So tell them what it is. Tell them the name, and I tell them an example of a trigger sound, which is the smacking thing. A few people, as soon as I say that, they deliberately. start smacking.
Yeah, we're
So
all aware
kind
of
of
that.
like, so it's like,
Yeah.
okay, and at this point, I just kind of laugh about it. I just think, okay, this is going to be one of the ones that takes a little longer, maybe, and that's okay, and and that's the other thing. Find the humor in it. Try to find the humor in it. That's huge.
Yeah,
Try to find
humor
the
has
humor
come
in it.
up as, yeah, exactly. That has come up as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's huge. But some people, most people, I would say, they're interested because it's kind of bizarre. I think it's a strange thing. It's
Yeah.
invisible and it's something that like you could just be making up, because you're high maintenance or you just want to have something. You want it to be about you. And it's like, no, believe me, I wish I could just make this disappear. I don't want this. But most people, they find it interesting. And what I noticed too is a lot of people say, misophonia, what is that? And I tell them what it is. And they say, oh, I think I have that. Because they'll say, oh, me too. I hate when people smack when they eat. Oh my gosh, I hate that. And I'll just kind of shake my head and laugh. And I'll tell them, you probably don't have this because you're just annoyed by it, whereas I'm going into fight or flight mode, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
But
it's
people will
interesting trying to
relate to it.
explain that line.
Yeah. I want to ask you something though, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
go
It
for it.
pertains to your podcast and to you and to your guests that
Yeah.
you interview. One day I was listening to one of your episodes and I was on a hike and it was a young woman in another country. I can't remember where, but I was into the podcast and her story, and she was talking about her own triggers. And then her dogs started barking and I was getting mildly triggered. It wasn't a full on trigger because it was, first of all, secondhand. It's pre recorded.
Yeah.
It's not happening right now. It's not right in front of me. And the the dogs are in, it sounds as though they're right outside or in another room. And so it was a mild trigger. But it was annoying me enough that I had to just go to the next episode
Yeah.
or whatever it
Yeah.
was. But and that's fine. I wasn't upset. I wasn't mad at it or anything. Of course, it is what it is. However, I find it so interesting that there are so many common triggers among us, but I hardly ever hear people talk about dog barking being a trigger for their misophonia, and it's because it's my number one. It's my number one trigger. Do you know many people that have that?
Yeah, yeah, I haven't heard about that one that much in particular. That's interesting. I mean, I have definitely heard of people who have triggers that are, might be very different from others. And so sometimes, I mean, if you actually, if you're talking about, you might be, I don't know if that was the Marjorie episode. I think she was in Panama, but she had an odd, well, I don't want to say odd, but an unusual trigger of her dad rubbing his hands together. So there are
Yes.
definitely triggers that I think are different. But it's just is yeah. I mean, but obviously they're all related because they're kind of sound based. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, the jury's out as to how that works, but it just happens that mouth and eating are the most popular, quote unquote. But
Yeah.
I mean, I can totally see how dog barking is one. God
Well,
knows
thank you for
how.
saying that.
Yeah, God knows how. Well, who knows how that that develops. But yeah, I have not. No, the short answer to your long answer to your short question. I haven't heard that one that much. But
Well,
I'm
I was
sure
just
people
curious.
listening are could probably identify. Somebody can.
Well, yeah, that's part of why I wanted to kind of just throw that out there, in case during future interviews, someone else might say, "Oh, by the way, like that other dude, I hate
Yeah,
dog barking too."
if you're listening, please hit us up, both of us on Instagram. That we I think Corey, we'd both love to know if
Yes,
dog barking
please.
triggers you. Because I mean, that's everyone has. It seems like a lot of people have dogs. So if that
Yeah,
is a trigger, that is kind of tough in this society.
yeah. And the thing is, like I said, I love dogs, and I walk my dog's friends. When I go to my friends' houses, their dogs come and sit on my lap, and I pet them, and I just love them. They're like, especially, and that's the other thing too. During this time, because we're recording this during the quarantine, um, of course, I'm single, no kids. I live alone, and if, and I'm not dating right now. And so what I notice is I'm fulfilling that need for touch and intimacy to some degree by going to visit my friends and cuddling with their dogs. So their
Mm.
dogs come and sit on my lap. Sometimes I have two of them and they're just so cuddly and loving me. And, it's great. And when I leave, I feel good because I've visited with my friend who's at least 6 feet away and we're sitting outside, but I've been able to hug the dogs. And there really has been something therapeutic to that, which I found not surprising, but just interesting. So it's like almost a dichotomy. My number one trigger is a dog barking, but as of late, one of my main comforts is to cuddle up with dogs.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, strange times call for, strange
Strange method,
situations like
yeah.
that. Have speaking of that, I mean, have you had other interesting things happen during lockdown related to misophonia? Like maybe things getting better because people are just not out as much, walking around as much, or worse.
It's not been such a matter of better or worse so much that because my sensitive is so hearing, I tell people like I hear everything, and
Yeah.
so behind so behind where I live behind a school, and there's a street that doesn't get a whole lot of car traffic, and so it's a good street for bike riding and jogging and walking your dog. And what I've noticed during the quarantine, there'll be times when I'm sitting at home doing whatever, and I'll suddenly hear voices. And it's like people laughing or joking or kids talking to their mom or kids playing. It's like, where are these voices coming from? And then I realized, oh, yeah, people can't go to the gym, they can't go to the beach, they can't go to parks, but they can take their family and go on a bike ride. So I've been hearing a lot of that. And it doesn't bother me. I like it because it's been like this link to other people and it's a
Hmm.
nice sound. People are spending time with their family, they're getting exercise, walking their dogs. It's all positive, it's all nice, so that's one of the good things that's come of it, you could say.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, yeah, I guess. So, have you had, have you, you're single right now. You're not living with anyone. Have you had, has this come up with any relationships, intimate relationships that you had in the past? And you don't have to, if you don't want to
Oh,
talk about it,
sure.
that's fine too.
Oh, no, that's fine. um Misophonia, the people that I've had close relationship, yeah, I guess I can kind of nutshell it like this, because I've spent most of my life being single. I'm just happier that way. But I
Hmm.
have had a few more intimate relationships that were long term. But the people that I've been in relationships with have been understanding, and they had good table manners. So for the most part, it was fine, because they didn't trigger me themselves. The only time it would be an issue is if there's some external sound that's triggering me and they have a hard time understanding, like, why is that bothering you? It's across the street, that kind of thing. But they just know, they know what. And then the other thing is I have to sleep with a fan, white noise machine, because that blocks out all the noise and then I can sleep. And so that can be kind of annoying to some people. But
Gotcha. Yeah.
I guess it's a package deal, as far as that goes, because I
Yeah.
gotta have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And does that help you go to sleep, by the way? Like having the white noise? There's no situation where you can go to sleep just with ambient?
It does. It definitely helps. In fact, it's almost a Pavlovian effect, if you will.
Ah.
Growing up, my dad always had we grew up in the deep South in southern Mississippi and Louisiana, and it's of course really hot and humid in the summer. And even in the winter, though, my dad would either have the air conditioner on or a fan on. And so it's time to go to sleep, that noises, it's going to be on. In fact, my mom would, before going to bed, she would clean the kitchen, load the dishwasher, and then run the dishwasher. So that white noise from the dishwasher is such a soothing sound to me. It
Mm.
puts me to sleep because I have that association. So, like, it's a feeling of home and comfort and security and being taken care of, and things are being clean and everything's good, and it's the cool
Absolutely.
air. It's such a comfort, you know.
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, that's fascinating. Yeah, that is, yeah, definitely can be a Pavlovian aspect for a lot of this stuff. Yeah, I guess maybe we should start to start to wrap up, actually, one thing I was curious about is if you had maybe reached out to any audiologists or therapists at all, or any professionals, or have you just been learning and treating this yourself, like by far the majority of us?
It's mostly been the latter. I find that, I haven't really spoken directly to any audiologists. I did connect to someone, an audiologist in Florida, and we follow each other on Instagram. And because I think I followed a hashtag misophonia, and that's how I found them. But I haven't, I live in a different state, of course, so I haven't made an appointment with them or anything, but I like following them and learning about audiology and the other interesting, for lack of a better word, disorders related to hearing.
Yeah.
But as far as professional help, I haven't really sought out any professional help. I think one time I spoke to a medical doctor about it a little bit, but he didn't know what I was talking about, so I just dropped it. But
yeah, not uncommon.
Yeah, exactly. So I've learned so much from. It's been almost like a global community, and sometimes you have to find these people, like this podcast, for example.
Yeah.
And just in connecting with people and hearing about their triggers and what they do, and just the main thing for me is I guess it was about 13 years ago when I found out there's a word for this and that it's a real thing. Just knowing that other people have it, that gave me so much comfort. In the way I articulated it at the time is that I'm not crazy. It's not just me. That was huge for me. So that in and of itself was tremendously therapeutic. And then from there, I've just been doing the things we talked about between my art and exercise and having control over situations as much as possible, including letting everyone around me know about misophonia so that they can be prepared. Just in doing those things, I feel like I'm good. I feel like I can function way better I'm in a much, much better place than I was, say, 15 years ago, for sure.
Well, that's great. I think we should end it on that positive note of
yes.
art, exercise, community, and then just exploring your own coping mechanisms. I think we could learn a lot from each other, and
absolutely,
good luck to everybody. Well, thanks again, Cory. I will have thanks again for everything you talked about here, but also kind of the art that you're working on and sharing. I'll have links to those in the show notes if anyone's interested. A lot of artists have come on this podcast, so it's been cool.
I've noticed that. Yeah. That's great.
All right. Well, thanks again, Cory.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate all of your work, and I really, truly believe it's helping people. So thanks again.
Thank you, Cory, and thanks, everyone. You can email hello@misophoniapodcast.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at Misophonia Podcast and Twitter at Misophonia Show. Please leave a review in iTunes. And don't forget to check out the Miso List at misolist.com. Music, as always, is by Moby. And for now, until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.